Now to the war in Ukraine, and authorities say that 18 people, including 9 children, have been killed in a Russian airstrike on the home city of President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Russia alleges it was targeting servicemen in the city of Kryvyi Rih, but President Zelenskyy says civilians have been killed and that the action shows an unwillingness from Russia to bring this war to an end.
My condolences to the family and friends. The missile hit the area next to the residential buildings, a playground, ordinary streets. These are just non-humans. Anyone who could do this, there is no word for these Russian scum.
Well, let's get some more on the situation now in Ukraine. We can speak to our security and defence analyst, Professor Michael Clark. Professor Clark, morning to you. Thank you so much for being with us. It's not the first time Kryvyi Rih has been hit, of course, in this war, but it's the latest strike, this time killing 9 children.
Yeah, and 18 deaths this morning. I was looking at the number of injured as well, as about 60 people injured, so there's about 80 casualties. This was a ballistic missile which seems to have fallen near to some buildings. The missile may have hit a slightly open area, but it demolished a lot of buildings, damaged a lot of cars, and then it was followed up by a drone strike as well. Mm-hmm. And the Russian claim that this was a strike on a restaurant in which Ukrainian commanders were meeting their Western advisors has no basis in evidence at all. Not evidence that I have seen. It doesn't stack up at all. But so this was a residential building, and the death toll is pretty high, even by modern standards. So this was a ballistic missile followed up by a drone strike. And sadly, this is what is happening on a regular basis.
Briefly on that justification the Russians have given, there are Western military leaders in Ukraine at the moment, aren't there?
There are.
Helping them.
No, there's no argument about that. Yeah, I mean, Western advisors have been helping the Ukrainians, and they're perfectly within their rights to do that if Ukraine asks for help from its allies.
Absolutely. All right, so let's talk about the ceasefire, as called, which is not really holding at all, and the decision not to hit energy and infrastructure, and whether or not that is actually taking place.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little degree of restraint. According to the terms of the so-called partial ceasefire, that both sides would look towards developing a method to stop attacking each other's energy facilities, but and using long-range weapons. The Russians managed to attack energy facilities in Kherson about eight or 9 days ago using artillery. And the Ukrainians accused them of putting out the grid in Kherson, which is true. The Russians have accused the Ukrainians of attacking some of their energy facilities. But again, there's no real evidence for that. So I think both sides have been more restrained, but it hasn't stopped the problem. And still, the Russians are, according to NATO's intelligence, the Russians are launching 1,000 drones a week at Ukraine, all other targets, which is about 150 a night. Now, the Ukrainians are shooting quite a lot of them down, or bringing a lot of them down, but quite a lot still get through. This time last year, they were getting 95% of them. Now they're getting something closer to 50 to 60% of them. So a lot are getting through, and they're still doing a lot of damage, 150 a night.
So while there's talk of ceasefire, drone strikes continue.
We're nowhere near the practicalities of a ceasefire, Kamali. And there it is. I mean, Kryvyi Rih is quite an important city. Every time it's attacked, it matters because it's west of the Dnieper River. And, you know, this is the sort of more protected part of Ukraine, so they're going deep into there. And Kherson, of course, which was part of... The Russians had Kherson, they had the area of Kherson. They've been pushed out of there, but they still, although that's in Ukrainian hands, the Russians still use artillery against it all the time. And of course, it's a very unsafe city to be in.
And Kryvyi Rih, of course, is where Zelenskyy is from. That's his
and that's Zelensky's home city,
symbolic in that regard. Now, the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is in Europe at the moment. He's been holding talks. Talk to us about what he's had to say in the past sort of 24 hours or so.
Yeah, I mean, he was saying yesterday at NATO, in answer to questions, not part of his speech, but in answer to questions, made it very clear twice. He said that you were not interested in negotiations about negotiations with the Russians. You know, we're not going to spin this out for very much longer. And then later on, in answer to another question, he said, we're not interested in talks about talks. And he was quite strong on it, saying, look, the Russians have had enough time and we're getting pretty fed up of being strung along, because it's obvious that what American negotiators are being strung along by the Russians. Now, the question is, does Rubio really speak for the administration when he says that? Because we know that's what he thinks. It's what he used to say before he went into the administration. So is this, you know, his personal view that's intruding in a way onto the official line, or has the White House decided it wants to issue warnings to Russia not to do this? But the fact is, we still don't know. I mean, Russia was still not made subject of tariffs, whereas Ukraine was. So, President Trump's tariff policy last week But he put 10% on Ukraine, plus 25% that was already on Ukrainian steel exports, on all steel exports. So the Ukrainians are already suffering with tariffs, but there are no tariffs on the Russians. So whether Rubio was speaking for himself or speaking for the administration, we don't really know. But the message from Rubio is, don't keep stringing this out. We're going to have a ceasefire soon, or, he says, there will be consequences. But then he said, well, let's be hopeful. We're not going to put a time limit. I'm not going to put a time limit on this. So we still don't know if the Americans decide that they've given the Russians more time than they need, more time than they should give them. We didn't really know if the United States and President Trump is prepared to be really tough with President Putin.
No, we won't know that. And we might see if President Trump decides to post on his Truth Social at some point today, and we
might.
may get an idea. All right, Professor Clark, thank you. Speak to you again very soon.